Hello, everybody. My name is Barbara, and I'm a designer, a professor, and researcher in design here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm very glad to be with you in this PDC 2022 for the presentation of my paper, Reassembling People, Redesigning Forests, Reforesting Democracy. All over the world, we are witnessing a strong shaking of democracies, both in the countries considered as central and in the so-called peripheral ones. Democracies are being challenged by authoritarian regimes. In parallel with this phenomenon, all over the world, forests and their population are being threatened. Entire biomes are being lost, directly affecting the global climate. Faced with this situation, this paper aims to provoke reflection on the possibility of reforesting democracy by reassembling persons and peoples of the forest and beyond. Climate change denial and democratic denial, the urgency of reassembling. With the election of Trump in USA and Bolsonaro in Brazil, the relationship between climate change denial and democratic denial became very clear. Faced with this challenge, intellectuals started seeking theoretical and practical paths. Bruno Latour is one of them, with his conceptualization of a political ecology that articulates political assemblies and scientific assemblies. And more recently, seeking to get down to earth, redesigning assemblies of humans and non-humans. And also institutions as United Nations, among others, are seeking ways of confronting global warming. Big events like the COPs, the Conference of the Parties, on one hand, promote official assemblies, and on the other hand, provoke assemblies in the streets, that is, protests from social movements and others. While political paths are being sought, forests continue to burn. It's urgent to reassemble, but who and how? Reassembling people for the climate, reassemble people of the forests. Assemblies exist since ancient times. In ancient Greece, they were attended only by men. Women, foreigners, and slaves were excluded. In recent history, assemblies of all shapes and colors have emerged all over the world. Arab Spring in Indonesia, Occupy Wall Street in USA, June process in Brazil. These assemblies are rather ephemeral. How can we consolidate them? Some cases can guide us. First case, reassembling people for the climate in France. Thierry Peccei tells us about the case of the so-called Gilets jaunes. They began to protest weekly against the increase in taxes on fossil fuels and against the reduction of carbon emissions. Government and society then co-designed a citizen climate convention, where convention means an assembly of 150 citizens with special attention to their social diversity. The second case, reassembling people of the forest in Indonesia. Anand Singh tells us about the conflicts that arose with the installation of a logging company in the Maratus Mountains region. Some citizens advocated a right to multinational development that included forest products, while others advocated forest conservation through village-based developments. Singh brings out the complexity of those frictions, which range from interfamilial relations to global connections, and incites us to think that frictions do not prevent collaborations. On the contrary, they reinforce collaboration between actors with different points of view and experiences regarding the forests. Indigenous people, activists, academics, nature lovers, and even entrepreneurs, considering that the forest itself is an assembly of varied plants in close collaboration. The question here is to what extent these experiences at the initiative of governments and or societies and communities, whether in big cities or in the deepest forests, can contribute to a redesign of the forests and at the same time to a reforestation of democracy. Redesigning forests from infrastructuring to reassembling. Here the question is brought explicitly into the field of participatory design. The concept of infrastructuring implies not only recognizing the social cultural practices of a territory, but also through design, interrelating humans and non-humans for the emergence of new practices. Infrastructuring requires distributed agency among different participants to allow appropriation of opportunities and share decision-making within the design process itself. But to address initiatives such as the COP and the CCC, and to focus on issues of democracy, diversity, and difference, we propose the concept of reassembling, as reassembling people may touch the most sensitive nerves on the relationship between climate change denial and democratic denial. We could propose assembling, but we insist on reassembling to emphasize, on the one hand, that's necessary to assemble in other ways than in modern forms, and on the other hand, that it's an ongoing process. Reassembling by means of design is urgent. Reforesting democracy. If the ideas of reassembling peoples and redesigning forests can be well perceived, the idea of reforesting democracy generates strangeness. Perhaps what makes it strange is the persistent dichotomy between nature and culture. To get out of it, Manuela Carneiro da Cunha's analysis of the rubber tappers' struggle in Amazonia is very inspiring. She emphasizes that the rubber tappers thought they only produce rubber when, due to the very characteristics of their activity and ways of life, they also produced biodiversity. The Amazonian biodiversity has been as co-designed by the rubber tapping activity, a contradictory mix of extractivism and preservation, as the social diversity of the citizen climate conventions has been co-designed by a conflictual interrelation between government and citizens. We bet on the constitution of this complex and conflictual assemblies between non-humans and humans, and always including those who think and act differently from us. These are the forest-like connections with all the frictions that reinforce collaborations. Only this way can we imagine and materialize a reforestation of democracy. This implies an effort that is as local as it is global, to which participatory design with its theories and practices has much to contribute. Here are my references. Thank you to all these authors. And thank you, obrigada, for your listening, in memory of Chico Mendes and Bruno Pereira and Tom Phillips, and with gratitude to the indigenous people of Amazon.